We're good.
All right, everybody. Hello, welcome to another guest edition of the Terrible Podcast. I'm going to read today's quote. Today's quote is: Our highest endeavor must be to develop free human beings who are able of themselves to impart purpose and direction to their lives. The need for imagination, a sense of truth, and a feeling of responsibility. These three forces are the very nerve of education. And that's by Rudolf Steiner. Hello, Ashley. How are you?
I'm doing well. Really, really excited for today. How are you?
Oh, I can't. I've never been better. Every day it
Well,
just seems like it's getting better on this magical ride, so I can't complain.
so I want to dive kind of into the quote here. I came from the education realm, and I looking at the quote, listening to it. I love that there's three parts, like three different calls to action. Right? We have to have a first off that feeling of responsibility, which means like if I know something, I should be sharing it. You can't grow and develop as a human race if one person keeps all of the truth or all of their knowledge to themselves. And that's honestly one of my biggest issues is I can't stop talking about things. And not everyone wants to know all the stuff that I know. But I also love that need for imagination. A lot of times people get so bogged down and closed in. And honestly, I think as you get older, you kind of lose that imaginative quality. And then a sense of truth goes back to like just being true to yourself, right? That's how I'm interpreting it. So taking that and saying, this is what I think, this is what I believe, and like the sky's the limit. And then when I find all these things, and I can go and talk to people about them. So that's kind of my perspective here on the quote. But let's jump in here and introduce our guest because I want to hear what he has to say about this. You are our first male guest that we've had on our podcast, so super exciting. And we're gonna give him a chance to introduce himself, kind of talk about what he's got going on. But before we do that, let's just have his insight into this quote and welcome Philip.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, we're so excited for you to be here.
Thank you. Would you be able to repeat the quote for me one more time so I can synthesize it again?
Yeah, no problem. Definitely. I'd love to read that. Whoa, I just zoomed it in way too much. Okay, here we go. Our highest endeavor must be to develop free human beings who are able of themselves to impart purpose and the direction to their lives. The need for imagination, a sense of truth, and a feeling of responsibility. These three forces are the very nerve of education.
Very powerful. We don't really have education like that these days, do we?
No, there's not. And how interested that you think you're becoming educated when you go to school, right? But it's really just a structured series of standardized tests. It's basically just creating molds of the same person.
Yes. I like your terminology, molds, because had the word informed, and like people just get informed of their place, set into a certain template, and that doesn't fit for anybody, and so it's a really rickety, unstable template from the get-go, really. But yeah, like with regards to compelling people and inspiring people and giving them the tools to walk in their purpose and potency, that would be majestic and lovely to explore more of. I have a vision for cultivation of gardens and yoga and astrology all being taught in the same space with elders and youngers, and us all learning from one another, from in the sense of a new class, because we're not being ageist, we're not being sexist. We'll just be able to learn from each other, from what each other bestow in different ways, because we all have different reflections and gifts.
I love that. I think there's this preconceived notion that people have of, as an adult, I should be more wise than a child. But if you really, I used to work with kids all the time. I learned so much from them because they're so open-minded and they're so free and they don't feel like there's no censor and there's no guilt about anything that they say.
Yeah, we, when we are like our children, when we were children, we were the teachers. So
right,
we've kind of we I feel that we ingratiate ourselves to think we've become so unhumble to the innocence of just being.
And then what is that leads you to becoming what? You know, well, I can answer that. I asked, and now I'm going to answer my own perspective. It's like, look around at the situation and the way people are and interact with each other. And when people want to complain about the status of the world, there is no introspection of what am I doing and how did I help us get here? You know, and so I think that if people took a little bit more accountability and tried to be a little bit more open-minded and flexible and creative and imaginative and realize, like, we don't all have to think the same thing. That's the beauty of kids, right? They don't all want to, they just want to play with each other. They don't even know who this person is when they see them in a park or something. They don't have none of that. It's just like, hey, you want to play this? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. You know? That's why I feel like I identify so much as a child because I like to maintain that kind of status in my brain. And the more time you spend around kids like that, you know, any age, you that's why I love that what you were just talking about is that you're learning from them, but then they're learning from you, and it just literally fosters a growth mindset.
Yes, for sure. Like even like going back to the most basic of things, like the gardening and the cookery, just doing that with the children there gives us the opportunity to learn so much about our own stumbling blocks, our own communication, our own projections. They just come up so obvious
Right.
when we're around kids and people we love, and older people will just, like the more mature, like elders, well, they will just be chuckling at it all if they've matured along with it. So we can learn so much.
That's the type of community I would love to be a part of, because if there's, and this is my own personal opinion and experience, is that I found that when people have a tendency to get older, they become more closed off, less of a free human being. It's like all of a sudden they have blinders on. When they were some way 10, 15 years ago, they get older and then they lose that, and they become more judgmental and more, you know. And if you're saying that there's these elders in this community, right, they have to be open-minded to that experience. I would love to surround myself with people like that, because there's no talking down to somebody else of like, well, I'm older, so I know this, you know.
There is that exists. There are those people, but it's not everyone. For my mother's, you know, I love my mum, but she'll be like, I'm your older. And I was like,
yes, that's my mom too.
Doesn't mean you're better than me. I am your equal. And this is a big thing for our age group. But we can actually step aside and allow them to have their stumbling block again with that. Then we've already proven we don't have anything to prove.
Right.
And so we can again feel into just taking the higher ground.
And I love it when people say that, because when you think about it, like the higher ground prevents you from also being like falling victim to like the flood of emotions, the flood of judgments, the flood of any of those kind of ideas. But we always look at it as being like, well, I'm better. It's like, no, I'm just keeping myself away from that, you know, so I can kind of watch what's going on. My dog often partakes in our podcast.
What's up, Giz?
All right, so we're so happy that you're here. I'm so excited that you agreed to do this. Let's get a little background on you. Kind of, who are you? Where are you? When I talk to people about when I have having guests on, I say I just want to know the who, the what, the why, and the how.
Well, I am always looking to recreate who I am now. When I first started this journey, I suppose would be when I realized that I actually enjoyed the character I had created for myself, and that actually that had to be completely and utterly disassembled, if that's the word.
Yes.
And I was like, oh well, I only just started to like that guy, and it's got to go. Oh wow, what a experience! It was hilarious, of course. But then I was like, that was just the beginning of the journey, I suppose, and that would have been around 2007 or 8. obviously our journeys start way before that. Everything contributes to
Hmm.
our experiences. There are things that happen before then in my life, but that was when I first started my spiritual quest, as would be deemed as such, if you will.
And what kind of brought that about? Did you just wake up one day and you're like, nah, I'm ready to do something different?
Well, lives have their traumas and their swings and their roundabouts, and so looking back now, there was grief due to me losing my father in 2005, but then I had different things to take my attention away from that, like escapism through going into exploration of the psychedelics and alcohol and festivals and things like this with my friends like this, and that was grand. And I wouldn't shift that for the world because they were fantastic experiences, social endeavors that really would contrast the years that would follow.
Hmm.
And so when I broke up with my first ever real serious girlfriend around 2007 into 2008, I had a lot more time in my hands to be with self.
Hmm.
And that was great fun in a sense because I got the opportunity to go down many different rabbit holes of exploration in conspiracy theories and spiritual quests, and so that was quite fun.
I love that you could thank you for talking about your journey, because I feel like a lot of times people want to kind of gloss over that part when they're like, I started this kind of new life or a new perspective, and they don't want to talk about like those parts that some people would call escapism or like indulgent behavior or anything like that. But what's so beautiful is, Brandon's gone through that. I've gone through that. You need to have a kind of that to be able to have that perspective of like, I tried these things and it didn't do what I wanted it to do.
Yeah, and we remember again really quick. We were speaking about this earlier, Ashley, about how it's okay to engage in these behaviors. You have to kind of, in my experience, I felt like I just had to do it and do it and do it, and then I just got sick of it. And there's one day where I'm like, I just can't do it anymore. I feel kind of disgusted, and then I just had to change my behavior, and that's kind of what led to like a dark night of the soul, and that's what I write about in my new book. Everybody, check it out at shadowwork.com. But yeah, I talk about a lot of those experiences, and that really is what I'm hearing with you, Philip. This is great. It's really resonating with me.
And I think that sometimes, especially like if you go through a breakup, that period of time when you are alone really, really kind of makes you look inward,
Mm.
because there's nothing to look outward. And I think a lot of people have been going through that, um, especially in the last year.
Yeah, for sure. um this was my first kind of exploration into these types of things, and I didn't really know how to support oneself. It was just the fact that there was this great cradle of wealth of information and things on YouTube, and so I started to explore that in, like, 2008, as I was saying, and documentaries and all kinds of things went everywhere with it, as you can imagine. And so the some of the things you think, well, this is so far out, it's not going to ever come back around, and then 2020 would happen. You're like, geez, these things are real.
Right. Right. And so
uh,
what kind of started you, like, was there one kind of initial subject that kind of made you kind of dive in deep?
well, yeah, I love. Well, firstly, it would have been the initial kind of things like Alex Jones' Endgame and things like this, and being able to relate to the society going to more the Fifth Element style kind of thing, Black Mirror style thing. You could see that then from their projections of what that might entail, and so also there was all I always for a long time watched some people, which I still consistently watch now. I don't really watch that kind of stuff like Alex Jones now, but like that helped me get into exploring different avenues of reality, and it really like opened me up to these kind of things. And so uh, even looking at like more esoteric things like timelines, like the genetics of the human race and aliens and how, but not like some Gaia stuff which I explored, but more like which I think is a lot of there's a lot of bullshit as well as there's a lot of truth. And so I would suggest that maybe there's these timelines with regards to more going into technology more going into less emotional connection to self. And this is actually something that happens within cycles of growth. The divisions are put in, or separations, or beams, parades, different illusions are put into the consciousness. You could say they're like splinters into our consciousness, and that as a human race, and they actually develop us to gain more empathy because we're like, this is some bullshit in our way, like frosted glass. I can still see the dog through the frosted glass, whatever, you know. But actually, really, it is suffering. It's like last year, like the different. Or you could say it's going to the moon, or it could say it's dinosaurs, or evolution, or they did a vowel shift, or all of these different types of things, just to scatter a few in at the top of my head there. You know, dinosaurs, all of these things, like even just like the cosmology. This is to get to the root of what you asked. Cosmology was one of my super duper interests. We're talking about timelines and things like I started to explore different interviews, like you know the Camelot projects. Is it? I think that might be called. And Lilu Mace was someone who's great, who interviewed those of people like Bruce Lipton and Joe Spencer and Wayne Dyer, all of these types of people who would talk about consciousness. So it's quite a wide bandwidth of things that I was exploring. But the main Gigi Young, I don't know if you know her, but she's talking about more this thing of like how we keep manifesting back through time from some kind of future destination, from future timeline. And this is really a good way to grasp it, as far as I can tell. And that because in our lives, we ain't got enough time to bail it out. We are like emotional sponges, and we can do a bloody good job, but we're not going to be able to change the future endeavor of being this kind of Terminator situation in the future. You know what I'm saying? Like Judgment Day.
Right.
And so what we have to keep doing is coming back after our lives, living them again, and loving the fucking hell out of ourselves and each other more and more. And the more that we practice this by reincarnating into these experiences again and again, then we are slowly changing the timeline into a more organic one. And that's quite as layman's as I can get with it.
Yes. No, I love that. And I appreciate, we've never met, so I don't know exactly like what your background is in terms of career or whatever. I feel like that was very well explained for somebody like me who's just kind of initially dabbling into things. Brandon, I could tell, I was watching him as you were talking, and he's like, know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I've heard it expressed in other ways, and maybe I could share for some of our listeners. And it's really, it has to do with healing. And if you are able to heal yourself in the present moment, it goes forward and backwards in your timeline. So you can heal the past and the future. And that really fits in with that, because if that's the future we're headed to, it looks that way. I mean, not to get too conspiratorial, but if there's a way around it, I feel if that's the loop we're caught in, then, you know, let's do it. Why not? What else are we going to do? Play video games all day, you know?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Like, I was really seduced by the video games growing up, like magazines. I used to, after collecting the dinosaur skeletons week by week, I moved on to the PlayStation magazines, you know?
Yep.
And then you could even, I loved it at one point, eventually they did like this, you can build your own game on the demos on, I think it was PlayStation 2. That was really fun. But I didn't really transfer all the way. I didn't ever have I wanted a Master System. It was the first ever gift that I really wanted. But my first console was PlayStation. Not to say I was deprived. It was brilliant to play like Tomb Raider 3 and things like this. But so you hear my passion there and invigoration.
Right.
But it didn't really translate over because the substance wasn't really there. And, you know, even the joy of doing some, you know, Call of Duty at some point was a lot of fun. But actually, I know it was not good. You know, it's not got a good salivating feeling. It was, although some people I've heard on a very high vibration can say it's very good for people who've had past life experiences as wars in different kind of thing, and it helps them deprogram themselves from that kind of stuff. Maybe, but regardless.
Oh, I could see that. I could for sure see that, I think.
it is quite an enjoyable game for fun. What I like is it's connecting with other people in a team.
Yeah, it's a tool like anything else could be used or misused. And in this society, of course, it's way misused. I used to play a lot of Halo myself, and I was in the Marine Corps in the 90s. So I just worked on airplanes, but I still went through the hardcore training. You still go through boot camp. So I had that instinct. And when I was playing Halo, I felt that I was like, kill, kill, kill. And, after a while, I'm like, is this even good for me? Now I'm at the point where I don't even want to watch movies with killing in it just because it's simulated. And when I do, I keep consciously telling myself, like I was watching Big Trouble in Little China, with Kurt Russell. It's a really funny movie. So I was able to laugh at that kind of stuff. But yeah, if you get into that violence and you start to identify with those people on the screen, it could, lead to some dangerous places. But I'm sure we're all aware of that.
And
anyway,
so,
Ashley, bring us back.
Okay, I will. All right. So you started on this journey. Let's kind of talk perspective. How kind of were you brought up? Was this kind spirituality kind of thing ever incorporated into your childhood? And then that was why it was easy to kind of make that shift into all of these different things? Or were people around you like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Most of my friends were like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Yeah, I hear you.
But to be honest, and my mother was like that as well in general when I first started to do things, even just talking about things like, your Teal Swans or your Ralph Smarts, who I would consider like people who were mentors with regards to the self-healing, shadow work sides of things.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's a psychotherapist counselor and has been for now about 25 years or something like this. And so I grew up around that kind of thing from the age of 7, of her talking about psychology and all of this healing, all kind of stuff. And I was like, kind of interesting. She went through different phases of it where it was more, she went to festivals and the crystals about, but then she obviously went more academic, she's a bit of a square. She's got a bachelor's or master's, whatever. And so, these things that we get squared into boxes within society.
Yes.
And that's when we get stuck in the scene. But
Yes.
I went to like Christian, I think the whole of England is Christian schooling, but like they say it's a free schooling like society. But actually, can I hold the phone? Can you hold it?
Yeah.
Phone at my door. We asking?
You were saying that you grew up going to school in that free English schooling that you said had some kind of religious affiliation.
Right, yeah. So basically, I went to a C of E in junior school, and this is Church of England.
Yep.
And it was green. This means so much more now on a deep metaphysical level that I can't even go into right now. But like, before that, I went to an infant school. That is blue jumpers, and it was a red rose and a white rose on the chest, and this means so much because we was taught even then at age 4 and 5 about the English War of the Roses.
Yep.
And it's a massive part of a reflection of what we just lived through in 2020.
Yes.
Because the War of the Roses was about one of the last chess piece moves in the takeover of Europe from the pagan state, where people would be able to practice their natural organic connection to the land. And they had a totalitarian takeover from Rome, which basically firstly took over different parts of Europe and the bank, like Genova banking system, which was always being done from England originally, because it's the same flag. Anyway, so this was because there's the 3 prongs across the world with Washington, England, like London, and Rome, the Vatican. And so basically they hired different armies to take over Europe. And like firstly it was Finland, which was the original North Pole, and Helsinki, and they used to call it Hell, and so with 1 L. And so they actually hired Swiss and Swedish armies to take over, and this natural kind of kings and queens, emperors and empresses. They weren't kings and queens, so emperors and empresses that had little castles all over Finland. And basically they demolished their traditions, and they were the people who they were the people who really counted time, and they had like golden ages, they lived off the earth, and it was free, it was beautiful. And there was also the Cathars that, well, they lived in France, and a similar type of society around the same time, about 800 years ago. And 800 years ago, there was the last time that we had, I haven't mentioned, I'm an astrologer. So we had Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter in Capricorn then. And Pluto takes 240 odd years to go around the sky. Saturn 28, Jupiter 12. So for them all to be in the same place in Capricorn is quite rare. 735 years ago was the last time it happened. It happened again in 2020. And so the mirror of what actually had taken place back then, which was around the time that they did all of these taking over slowly, because what we lost was actually our ability to farm the land, because eventually they'd put in things like the different supermarkets and all these different things. At the same time, people left the UK to America. So that was going on at the same time. That bit of land was being taken over from its own heritage just at the same time as the Europe was, and other bits of the world as well, with the under the flag of Britannia.
Yep.
All was going on at the same time. Obviously, I know this one better because it's my patch of land. Not that I'm a nationalist.
Yes.
I'll try and cut this short because it's a bit boring, but it's a bit long.
I am so invested. I love English history. I was a history major, and I've always been very attached to English history. So you're speaking my language here.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we're going to break in really quick because I should say we should give a little background on ourselves just for people who might be new listeners. I went to high school, barely graduated because I couldn't deal with the mind control. I didn't realize it at the time. But anyway, I went to the Marine Corps. So I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, active duty in the 90s. And then after that, I was in sales for a while until about 2008. And I kind of came across truth, I would say, like around, what happened with certain towers and stuff. I don't know exactly, but just to say that there was more to look right around like 2004 or 5. So it'd been a while, but I was more engaged in escapism. But as I got into DJing later, and then I started stand-up comedy in about 2013. And then I started to experiment with things like you were saying before, the mind-altering substances. But I was older, so I was looking at it more of as a way to heal myself. And I've been on that journey ever since. And it's been amazing. And I've basically been at like I guess you could say college level of just like absorbing information, like the stuff you were talking about, all kinds of stuff, since about 2015 or 16. So I've been like a hermit, still DJing on the weekends and stuff. And then when 2020 hit, it was just like, okay, I guess now the weekends are free too. So Ashley, why don't you give a little bit of background about yourself?
Well, I went all the way in education, and
Yeah, you did.
I subscribed easily to those kind of fitting in that box. I'm great at taking a test, I can tell you that. But you leave, and what do you really get from that? You get a piece of paper that tells other people that somehow you're qualified to do a certain job, which really means nothing. And worked in the education field for the past 10 years, and now I am moving into my own business. So, and not working in education anymore. But that being said, I worked in informal education. I did not work as like an actual teacher in a school. It was very informal. All right, but let's jump back here. So this planetary alignment was at the same time in the War of the Roses as it was here, 2020. I love what you said about the transition of moving away from like being able to, I don't want to use the word worship. I feel like there's so many associations. Believe what you want.
Well, more accurately, the War of the Roses was a little bit a different time, but like it's all part of the same story. Same thing that happened in 1284 was actually the myth of the Piper of Hamelin was put into the consciousness of humans, and that's about some bullshit, basically.
Okay.
Belief systems, because the Pied Piper played such a catchy song, so majestic, so tantalizing, so misleading, that people just go along with it. And it was retold as Chicken Little, Disney retelling the story when they said the sky was falling. The sky was falling. And we were like, we need some evidence for this sky falling. That stinks. Something stinks about that tale. And then he just drew a star. And then he was like, look, the sky is falling. They're like, oh, oh, the sky's falling. And so they all did what the chicken was saying, and he just said, go that way, down this mine shaft. And they were like, of course, we're going down there without checking. Or maybe they might check. Like, I saw this good reasoning today.
Yep.
Very good reasoning. There's a meme of The Rock wearing a mask, having an injection, but it looked more like Lara Croft under that mask than Dwayne Johnson, if you ask me. But like, regardless, it was compelling evidence. And so you go along with these things, don't you? The thing of the media, the mediocrity, like a song can be a media, or a potato, you can put electricity through that media. So basically anything can be a message. Anything's a messenger, whether it is the news, or whether it's the Instagram, or whether it is a signpost or song. And people can go wrong with that false bullshit if they're not checking into themselves. And basically what the whole world did last year, isn't it? Because we've been misled and trained by the education system to check what's right, rather than what's conclusively beneficial with strategic questioning. And this is why we fell short, because for decades the society was taught to go along with what's right, or fact checking. If you fact check COVID, if you will, was set up to be so autonomous that it would prove that it would be going, protocols would be ticked, that everybody was doing this thing by the right way of doing it. But actually, anybody who used their intuition basically from the get-go knew it was bullshit, even if they were misled at first, kind of thing. Obviously, as an astrologer, I knew it was coming from quite a while ago, and we knew that 2020 was going to be a year of years, and I did videos about it being a world financial reset from 2017, because we knew Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter was going to be in Capricorn, and we were going to have a conjunction of Pluto and Saturn on January the 12th, 2020, which is the same day as the Wuhan announcement, which was more to the point about the sex trafficking that's going on back from Japan regularly than any kind of virus. That's the true background from what I can tell. And this thing is that actually there is this dark seed of evil, in a sense, within the world with regards to power and manipulation and consciousness. And it all comes down to, how can you steal like consciousness from inside the temple? How can you steal a jewel from inside a temple? This is like the deep esoteric truth of humanity. This is why we have all of these deep mythos with regards to the pyramids and things like this. So the jewel heist of the Pink Panther is about Peter Sellers in the movie going in to steal a crystal, and this Pink Panther is inside the crystal. And it's really bloody boring movie, because all I want to see is Pink Panther dancing, something like this, and the music playing. And all it is some black and white. And I don't understand what they're going on about, and it was boring. And it was about stealing this crystal and all the palaver around it. But it's an analogy for child trafficking, that movie. Because what they do is they get a baby and they petrify it to steal the crystals from inside of it. And that is how you steal. That's the only way, apart from slow brainwashing, that you can steal the crystallization of consciousness from inside another being. And that's how they create like this that drug, whatever that's called. I forgot what it's called. Have you heard of that drug that goes around Hollywood, apparently, that like Tom Hanks was things like this? Huh?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Buzz Lightyear stuff. It's like the least favorite subject, but this is what 2020 was all about. It's actually this coming into our consciousness, and then us being able to either not deal with it, to see it as bullshit, or to actually work with bringing these things out into the air so they can be dealt with. Because that's the really crushing thing about it. It's really, really brutally brutal, this world. Yeah. But then what we find is that in our relationship to these things, we can bail it out. And that's the terminology for two things. Like, I've got a boat and it's full of water. I've got to bail it out with my bucket. I've got to bail it out. Or it could be, shit, I'm in debt. Bail me out. It doesn't happen in court as well. Bail me out. And so what we got to do is love ourselves out of these types of things by bringing them into attention. Attention is love. I don't like talking about it as much as the next person necessarily. And basically, when you go into these subjects, it's important that you then go back on the incline and bring yourself back up and out of them. So that, because it's like a weave. When you're sewing, it's like a weave. You've got to go in to the discomfort, and then you've got to come back out to the light of day, which is pretty elusive. But at the same time, it's a hell of a lot more joyful than going into the depths of those types of topics every day.
Right.
So it's not really something I put my attention on every now and again, but it is basically the dark seed that's rotten within the core of humanity.
Yeah.
And that's what this whole thing last year is about with 2020. It's about how we can reclaim our vision. That's what we're coming back to change, because the more and more that we go into technology, the more and more that we give away our sovereignty, the more and more that we're actually not in our joy. And the joy is who we are. The joy is when we're doing something that we do love. And so basically, those are the types of subjects which I initially came and found when you were exploring the Alex Jones, like, that's fucking far out. What about the dark side of the moon? That's even further out. But then you listen to the likes of Terence McKenna, who actually talks about these types of things. And now from a very wide standpoint, you can see that actually this is a realm which is both paradise and hell. And it's us, which is the swinging pendulum of our attention and consciousness. And we do explore them both. We've all got kind of Neptunian placements. We've all got a 12th house placement. We've all got Pisces placements in our astrology charts. Some of us to more of an effect than others. And so, in a sense, with our attention, with how we feel, with our vibration, we explore these different zones and parameters within our consciousness. Sometimes we go down to the doldrums of hell, and this is so that with it we can be present with it and love it. And then we go back up into the hysteria of excitement and our own joy. Thing is, you don't want to stray too far off piece, not up nor down, because the bigger the wobble, the wider it is spin out of control, just like on a racetrack.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and there's a lot of hermetic talk about that, where they talk about to avoid the pendulum swing, how you can vibrate on a higher level, or kind of manifest the other side of the polarization.
The problem is that people, like, it feels like we can gaslit ourselves through these types of explorations, because if we check in with other people, sometimes they might say, oh, that's bullshit. You know?
Oh yeah.
And they sort of say, why do you think about that? You're schizophrenic or thinking like that. But basically, it's more awake to the fact that there is things to be healed in not just our individual, but the collective consciousness. And to be negated like that is quite disconcerting as well. To feel like that you're being negated, or to feel that you're being you're tapping into something which is bullshit.
So I want to get a little bit into your work as an astrologist. I need to formulate here what I'm trying to say. So did you like study this? And more importantly, I think what every listener wants to know is, you said you were calling this in 2017. What do you see for 2021 or 2022? Any big, you know what I'm trying to say? Like big, yeah. I won't call it like announcements or anything like that. I just think it's so interesting. And I've had my like birth chart done, but would need help explaining it. I think a lot of people don't even realize that there are these 12 houses and stuff like. I'm going to stop talking and just let you talk now. Okay.
Cool. Well, yeah. Well, firstly, so it was exploring things in these interviews like Project Camelot, like Cosmology, and things like this, talking things like Saturn's cube and the Moon Matrix, these types of things. And I was like, what is this bullshit? Very interesting.
Yes.
And stuff like this. And at this point, I was like, wow, that's so far. You know, they're talking about all these different things, like Saturn's well far out. If you're thinking about things like that in space, super spaced out, makes you feel really inferior, doesn't it? To think about all that, how small we are. But then the funny thing is, the the exploration into cosmology, I was really taken by the story of Admiral Byrd going into the Hollow Earth. And I loved that story, and I was completely taken by it. And this was years ago, probably
Mhm.
2009 or something, I don't know. And I was completely taken by this. And by this time, I was probably done a few mushrooms and acids and things like this. I was still excited to one day do DMT, which I would eventually do in 2012. Haven't done anything like that for years and years and years and years and years. But those were compelling explorations because, as I mentioned, I like the time wave zero theory by Terence McKenna, that we were slowly coming to a place of more novelty where things were coming to increase the perpetual growth of our intelligence and cosmic awareness more and more and more. And so he was talking about that being 2012. And that was when the Mayans said that it was going to be like
Mhm.
this position. But there's this thing they say that actually the calendars were switcherooed or wrong, and 2020 was really the Mayans' new year. And that was when we had the Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter in Capricorn.
Mhm.
So I certainly wasn't an astrologer when I was researching all this type of stuff, but I picked up a lot of the pieces before getting into being an astrologer.
Mhm.
Uh, so really, I'd immersed myself with such a wealth of backdrop of information that by the time that astrology came to me, I was so well equipped for it. It was amazing. But regardless, I was exploring these things about the Saturn's cube and cosmology and the hollow Earth. And so things like Shambhala, which is like inner continents, and Agartha, inner continents inside the Earth. And
Mhm.
I was like, is this a real thing? Is this actually the template for all planets? That actually they're all kind of hollow with an interior. And so this was, and actually it's quite abnormal and uncivilized for us to be out here on the exterior of the planet. And also now I can see that placing all of our importance on this exterior, which makes us feel so inferior, all of this illusions out here. When actually it's more of a, maybe I was like, still, is this an allegory for when we go inside of ourselves and meditate, or is this some real inside the earth stuff?
Mhm.
And jury's still out with that, but I feel that it could be both.
Mhm.
I really do. However, like I know that actually there is such an importance for us to continue to explore within ourselves consciously, metaphysically, because that is going to bring so much of cultivation to the shifts that we're able to make to the physical realm out here. It's because we place such an importance on the physical realm. And this has started majorly due to the kinds of snare traps, bear traps, and illusions that were put into place back in 1284 and moving forward through each and every century. Different layers, different divisions. Because the transits in 1284 was like there was about 8 planets in Capricorn, and Capricorn is Saturn, or as the ancient Egyptians would call it, Set, because it sets the scene in cement. And so basically, there was a massive eclipse on Christmas Eve, 1284, and this was about all of the power of the people being sucked dry and being put into constituents like the banks, the World Health Organization.
Mhm.
Yeah, them bastards. But that's them. And so also the education systems and that kind of thing. Okay. But obviously those who they didn't exist back then. It's the same people though. And so like that's them so victim. Oh, so victim. Okay. Basically, it's about putting so much of the importance outside of ourselves. If that's more of a metaphysical way of explaining it, rather than inside of ourselves. It could be that we're just looking at Madonna in Vogue or like whatever, Dwayne Johnson in the squared circle or on the silver screen. And so we got all of these different things that we put our attention on instead of gazing inwardly on ourselves. And so this is really where we lost our way a lot. And the fun thing is that because I went to that Christian school, this is so many different threads, but this is often how I work. We'll try and tie these all up. Uh, so, because I went to that Christian school, I knew a lot of the astrotheology, which is basically that all songs of the church go
Mhm.
around the seasons. And so astrology really, I mean, I must have done it in other lifetimes, if you will, because of my placements. I know that now as well. But like it just was like an old pair of shoes. It fit very easily. A lot of us have our gift sets that we bring into our experiences. which we carry in our soul, in our heart, in our akash, and we choose our genetical line like Cupid. This is like off piece, and so I feel that when we choose our parents, we choose them for the grief, for the bullshit that they're going through, because that will give us the opportunity to immerse ourselves in, like, you know, some real good rotten rooty stuff that allows us to come into our wealth. Because, you know, the peat, that's mucky soils, the real good stuff, that composite, you know, rotten stuff with all the good stuff. So we choose that, and we're like Cupid with its arrow, and we're like, with those guys, they really couldn't do with getting with each other, but it's fine. That's how we choose them, I feel. That's the mythology, actually, of Cupid and Chiron. That's actually the mythology of the centaur, which is the spirit incarnate into the physical, is the Christ. And so, you know, all stories are going around the same wheel of the year, of the day. And they would sing about this again and again and again in school. And so I knew about these types of things. So everything sets us up to be able to be where we're headed, because it's the timeless affair, but we count it in a timeline because of this chronology which was put into place with regards to calendars and bullshit back since 1284. Ever since before then, we didn't give a hoot about that type of time. We just spent our time doing things that we enjoy, doing a bit of gardening, doing a bit of yoga, doing a bit of music, making a bit of love maybe as well, all these types of things. And so those we've lost our key connection to trade as well, to naturally trading our gifts with one another to live in our abundance.
Yes.
Anyway, so one of the massive things I want to get back to and finish up with before I start going into the astrology properly is actually that we talked about time. I want to go back into time. So this, and I was watching these documentaries before I became into astrology properly as a professional, and that was about like learning about the reality and time. And we had this, like, I was deciphering this hollow earth. Is there many planets, outer space? What is going on with all that? And so I was learning like time is more like this box, but it's actually, we can get out of our own box. Saturn is the box, basically, and it's our own mind which we get put into. It's all these different paradigms that we get put into. And every time we break out of our box, we have another dark night of the soul. Every single time we do that, we can have countless dark nights of the soul. We could have one every day if it was that challenging to ourselves. And not healthy to do it every day, I don't think, but once a year maybe, or once every 2 years is quite enough. But like, whatever these things are, like, we have to walk ourselves back to our center of our heart, and sometimes some of the boxes can keep us rooted and tethered in a beneficial way. Like a box can be yoga or daily practice or writing or whatever it is. That to bring form, we must honor the physical world, because our body is physical. And so it helps keep us rooted when we practice things that honor that. We can't just go off woo-woo into meditating all the time. It's important to do that. And so basically, if you see your cube, like the Rubik's Cube, envision this for a moment. And then we've got these downward parameters, something I was discovering in my metaphysical exploration a couple of years ago. We've got these downward parameters, we've got these upward parameters. So this cube's got 4 different quadrants above and 4 different quadrants below. This is what I explored in my discovery of what this reality truly is. In the sense, there's the bottom 4, which is like when we are depressed, when we're feeling less than, when we're actually going down and exploring for hell realms, like we did a minute ago, remember? And but then when we bail ourselves out of that, when we dance in the water, skate, like, you know, toddling deeply with ice skaters, whatever, we're just doing these kinds of things, and we're above water, walking on water, like the Christ energy. And so we go on this figure of 8, up and down, and there's this middle template. So there's that 9 different dimensions within Saturn's time cube. And so when we are going down, some people just stay down there all the fucking time, and some people stay up there all the time. But then there's people like you and I feel, which are like, we do this butterfly shit that goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down all the time, where we're going to the traversing. We're like, this is boring up here at the summit. Let's go down and help some people down there. Let's help ourselves down there, you know, because really we're all part. It's all part of that. And so that's the way I see it, and that's why the butterfly is such an important thing in this Skeletrics, this figure of 8, this infinite dance which we do, this weave that we're currently always bobbing around with. And we see that within the astrology chart. So you can break it into those 4 quadrants as well. And so Saturn is number 8. It is the infinite cycle, is the timeless. My actual logo is actually this figure of 8. Many people use it. I'm a life path 8, and I'm a Capricorn. And so it's a massive thing, this Saturn stuff for me. And so, but breaking free of that is actually that we are lucid, we aren't boxed in, and actually this cosmology is deeply exploratory. And so I came into this thing, so we're not living on a ball, we're living in the flat earth. In my exploration, I was like, things can change due to the belief systems which we are holding. I think that maybe we can have the paradigm of the ball, we can have the paradigm of this of the flat earth and the hollow earth. These are, I think maybe it's more of a holographic deck. But the most important thing is that each and every single one of us are at the center of our own reality, and everybody else is out on counter space due to that. So you're in counter space for me, and I'm in your counter space for you. We are each the central avatar of our own reality, but we have this interplay between us. And so what they would say is that actually we're all this leading role, we're all center stage, and yet we're all each other's cast. And what does a cast do? Well, they say break a leg when you go on stage, don't they? So the cast actually supports you, holds you together, because it's reflecting back to us. They are an illusion. I am an illusion. And reflecting back to one another, we are supporting each other by actually very slowly reflecting back to each other, one another's traumas and shadows. We are each reflecting back at each other's darkness, but we're presented in such a beautiful, cutesy manner that we come across in this nurturing Mother Earth kind of. You know, it rocks. We're rock stars because we do it so gently. It's quite lovely, really.
I think you are so smart. It's like I could listen to you talk about all of this probably all day long.
We went wild. That was crazy. I'm trying to explain it, but it just gets too much, more and more, and then it's like, how can we get this together? So I appreciate the fact that you say that. Thank you.
And I did tell you we're gonna keep this at an hour. I don't want to keep you from living your life, but if we wanted to find you, if our listeners wanted to find you, where could they find you?
Well, I haven't really spoken about astrology yet, because
yeah, you know what? If you got the time and you're good.
Do you want to go for another half an hour?
Sure.
Hell yeah.
I think if you asked Ashley if she want to go for another month, she'd be like, why not 2? Sure, let's just keep talking.
I'm like, where are you? I'll fly down there and I'll become like your student. And
we've really been going for 2 hours. I can't believe it.
Oh no, we've been going for an hour.
Oh, okay. Well, so I because we had the time confusion, I was a bit confused. So yeah, I just would like to tie these things up, because none of this is about astrology whatsoever, really. This is just, you asked me the wild card question about how do I get into it. So yes. How do you get into it? It doesn't actually sell what I do or anything that or the services that I offer at all. And so to finish what we talk about, and then I'll do that a bit of that. That's all right.
Okay. Yes, let's go.
This is completely off piece. I wouldn't even explain this to anybody if they asked me about astrology, to be honest. It's just way too far out.
But you know what? We talk about these things, and in our podcast, we'll talk about that when Brandon and I do our tarot podcast, just the two of us. But your message and the things you've been talking about have been woven through with the things that other guests have said. And so the people that are listening to us are, I think a little bit
on it.
Yeah. And I can't say
open to other ideas.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say all of them, but look, if they're listening to us, they've got to be kind of open to other ideas. So,
well, I'd like to bring it into some congenial space of clarity rather than all of this illusion and delusion. So basically, it was astrology that grounded me. The stars grounded me to this template of knowing what Earth is. It doesn't matter about, I think floating off in space is bullshit, bollocks, and illusion. It's put into place by NASA, part of the programming with regards to, and the schooling and the education, to make us feel dismantled from our empowerment. And so really the mantle is Earth, and it is Earth being our shadow. It's, as I said, we present each other to our shadows in a way which is like those kids which we were speaking about earlier. Like they present our shadows to us, and it's like we can't get angry at that.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
And sometimes that happens. You do get fucking angry at kids when you're
Yep.
taking care of them and you're their parents, and you have to take your space because they reveal those bits.
Yep.
And it can be very exhausting, the lovely people that they are, you know. And so basically, anyway, going back to the being grounded in the atmosphere, it's like this astrology was actually based on a flat Earth cosmology originally, and back around 800 years ago, they had the cosmological knowledge of like Copernicus and like Ptolemy, and they were working with the sun and the moon being a similar distance from the Earth, and all of the luminaries actually dance and cascade around the sun. The sun is the center of the stage, but the stage is the Earth, and it's called terra firma, fixed stationary Earth. You don't go nowhere. And they even call it here in Mexico, where I am at the moment, tierra, which means tear of Ra, which is the temple of Ra. And so really, this is all about that pineal gland. This is our space. This is our garden. This is our nursery ground where we sow ourselves into the darkness so that we can find ourselves again through illusion. And this is what we do. This is our job. We are the offspring of the earth. We are the caretakers of the earth. We're the janitors of this space. And so this is something which I came to realize through my astrological research. But astrology academically, I wouldn't like, if I was to, many of my peers, many of my elders, they wouldn't want to listen to any of what we've said up until this point, really, because this is not academic astrology, except for some of the dates that I've mentioned. This is more metaphysics, which we're talking about, which is what astrology opens us up to, because we are metaphysical spiritual beings having this physical experience. Not to say that we should be detached from the physical reality, as I say, it's a beautiful thing. It's actually half of our experience.
I'm just going to interject right here. I love what you just said, because I think there is such a misconception of what astrology is. Because if you talk to a majority of people, they would think it's that metaphysical part of it. And they don't realize there's an academic part of it, because when they hear that, they're like, oh, you mean like your horoscope? You know what I'm saying? And they don't realize that there are different ways of looking at things. And astrology isn't what I think a lot of people kind of have this perception of what it is.
A lot of people, yeah, they've been misinformed with regards to astrology. Because the funny thing is that I'm so far from, so disrelated from that most of the time I'm dealing with the grief that most people just, in my circles, they just see the academics. And I'm amazing at the academics, but I love to talk about the metaphysics, which is more woo-woo, because the academics are very intelligent and genius and on point. They're mathematical geometry. It's just geometry. Everything about cosmology is geometry. And if you know your numbers and you know your art and you know your shapes, then that's the original language. Astrology is the language of all shapes, signs, and sigils, which is a dot, which is a line, which is a triangle, which is a rectangle. And so basically, when you use a stationary set, you're dealing with the terra firma, because it's a fixed situation which you use with your cosmological mathematics and geometry to know about. And the first perfect shape is a circle, and it's my craft. That's my influence. I'm an influential sphere, as are you. And so that's the first thing. They won't even teach you that in academics. They're still in astrology. Unless you go into an ancient mystery school, they're still not going to teach you that. If you go to a Ponzi academic astrology school, they're going to teach you about reading a chart, which is what I had to spend years learning about as well, or reminding myself. That is a very serious, as you can hear by my tone, academic, malefic, and Saturnian structure of learning, which takes years to learn about how to read a chart. And it's basically every planet has got its own appendix, its own different, it's like a library. Each planet is a library because they're a chakra. Each one is a chakra. Each one is a key tone. One is a frequency. If you actually get a piano, you've got your white notes, and they're boring and they make up most of the song. They flesh it out. But it's those minor notes, they'll bring you to tears. The minor notes are the spine of the song. the black notes they are. And
Mhm.
those are the notes that give the song definition. And so basically they are like the planets inside of like especially the powerful planets like Saturn and Jupiter, whereas the white notes could be more like your personal planets and these types of things that flesh things out in your story. And so this is just basically all language is based off frequency. Even
Mhm.
like these theta, delta is the vagina. It's actually where after water comes down a mountain, cuts through it, it does. Solid mountain, water cuts through it, makes estuaries. But it comes down to the river mouth, which is the delta, and that's the vagina where things are born into the cosmic ocean. And these are all different frequency states. That's like Venus. And so these are different frequency states that we go through when we're like coming out of the womb into child and into adolescence, into adulthood. And they're all different key tones, but we often get stuck in the root when we, as you said, people stop growing. Some people can stop growing because they get stuck in the root.
Yep.
And they don't know their root out of it. They don't know their value is infinite. The squaring of a circle, the physical, which is the body, and the circle, which is our spirit, the squaring of the circle, well, that's infinite value. And so that's
Wow.
that
Yes.
is, that's maths. And so basically, we are math. We are, the matter of fact is that like what we think does matter, and it's actually what we perceive truly does turn into the matter. And yet, so what we take seriously, serious is our story. The serious is the dog star. It's our tail. It's the tail of our tape.
Yep.
And so we've got to always continually work with the tail of our tape, our root, the rotten bit. If we don't know our root, we're just going to be cycling round and round and
Yep.
round and round and round like a broken round record. And so we're not even really going in to get out our kinks. We've turned into a fucking square. So this is why it's not good to go to foundations that are making us go into informed molds of being, and yet we're all unique. We've all got our own way of shining, we've all got our own way of expressing, and yet we're always kind of going into these different things that make us feel more accepted, like whether it's just having a potty mouth or whether
Mhm.
it's like being this way, whether it's being that way. It could be that we want to speak all elegantly because that's how it makes us feel accepted. I don't know. We've all got our own different things that we were marginalized by our parents, which informed us to find that we would be more receptive to different ways of being. And so this is since when we were crying and asking for breasts to be shoved in our faces. And it didn't stop for me, I tell you that. I'm joking. No, I don't cry.
That's right. It is a comedy podcast, so it's fine.
Humor in astrology is a very serious thing because your four humors are what dissolves.
Mhm.
It dissolves things. And so it's actually very good that we can go into these different frequency states of laughter. It's so healing for us. And yeah, like humors are actually bile, blood, and phlegm. And I always forget the fourth one, but yeah, these are in ancient magic astrology books. They tell you all about that. But yeah, like astrology really is beneficial for what I do with my work. It's like I like making videos about these types of things, having these types of discussions, interviewing people about metaphysics and stuff like this on my YouTube channel. But most importantly, I deal with the current sky. And yeah, we
Mhm.
have those massive transits which we were looking at of Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter meeting in Capricorn last year that reflected that we were coming to a paradigm shift. Yeah, the Mayans said it was 2012, but actually the Gregorian calendar shifted in between those two dates that we spoke about. One of many things that they shifted.
Mhm.
Even like Elizabeth I, they did this vowel shift and they channeled like Gaelic and Latin and shifted the English language and moved the A's and the U's and the pronunciation. And pronunciation is frequency and everything. So those tones which we lost ourselves in, really, the fact that we still managed to find ourselves in this well estate is quite bemusing, to be honest. We've done a
Mhm.
good job. Regardless, what I do is follow transits and apply them to astrology charts so people can know where they are at within the symphony of their own lives, within the orchestration of their hymn sheet, because we can really make the most of energy when it's applied to our own birth charts, because wherever the positions of planets were when we were born are unique to us. That's our own
Yes.
influence. the most easy things that we find that we can tap into, like for me, that's astrology and talking about these types of things, or the most challenging things like writing forms and things like that. I'm not a fan of that type of stuff. And those things which we learn to do because, you know, often we have to go through those biggest challenges. For instance, as someone who's really good at talking about astrology, I have to write out a lot of things to do with forms. I have to deal with a lot of things to do with organization, and that's not
Mhm.
good. But you have to learn through these things to be able to square our influential thing into a reality. And so
Okay, can I just interject here for a second? So going off of what you just said, when you said that you use their chart to talk about where they are, can you go into that a little bit more, like where they are in terms of their journey? Like what does that mean exactly?
we are always on the fool's journey, the hero's
Yes.
journey.
Mm-hmm.
It always comes back to the tarot, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I was actually scared of tarot when I first picked it up, even though I was an astrologer fully fledged working as a professional by the time I first engrossed myself towards the tarot deck.
Mm-hmm.
But the tarot deck, just like the zodiac, is a circle. As you may be aware, it's just a
Yes.
calendar.
Yep.
And so we start with the Two of Wands at the equinox, and it goes all the way around and to what would be like this, is it the Ten of Cups, which would be the end of Pisces, I believe. And that is the calendar of the pip cards. So you wouldn't use the major arcana. You can spread the major arcana around the circle, but it's just a reflection of the zodiac. You can use Vedic astrology, you can use Chinese astrology. At the end of the day, it's a circle with reference points around it, which is geometric. And
Yep.
you can put a story around that same one. You can call it anything you want. It doesn't matter what motifs you put over it, but there are ancient studies that have got great criteria and templates for us to tap into. I love checking into the Vedic astrology one because it's got such deep artistic depictions of what the story means. The depth and meaning of a circle is infinite. And so basically, when you have these different depictions to how even like the color circle works, or even the flower medicine wheel works, it's all the same thing. It's the hero's journey. And so basically, the archetypes of the story in the tarot deck tells the same story as the Vedic cosmology, tells the same story as the tropical zodiac, tells the same story as the Chinese zodiac, just through different motifs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so when we are going around our circle, we have every 28 years a Saturn return, but also what we also have is a moon phase which we're born into. And so, for instance, you could be born on a new moon. You could be born.
I was.
You were born on a new moon. Cool.
Mhm.
That's good to know. You could have been born on a first quarter moon. You could have been born on a full moon. You could have been born in between these dates. You could, like me, I'm born just after a third quarter moon, a week before a new moon, just after about 6 days before a new moon myself. And so basically, this means that actually, if you're born on a new moon, every 28 years you'll have a new moon in your chart. For me, I was born a week before a new moon, which means that when I was 7, I had my new moon. And so this is called the progressed moon, what we're talking about. And this helps us know where we are at. It's very deep what I'm talking about. It's not just
Mhm.
surface level astrology. It tells us where we are at in our personal journey. If we're born in a new moon, we haven't amassed a blooming. When you're 7, you're blooming because it's spring. It's your personal spring. When you're 14, it's a full moon. You're like, wow, this is
Mhm.
really coming to the fullness of my experience. And now, as you're gonna be aware, it's a bit like when I told you in 2007, right? When I was like, oh, I've just started to love who I am and I've got
Yep.
to let go of it all. That's how we started this conversation. I told you I was
Yes.
writing
Yep.
it. And so the full moon is where I was in 2007 or thereabouts. And I had a beautiful, beautiful, stunning girlfriend. I was like 19 years old. And I was like, wow, I've got all of these friends. But do you know what was going on 7 years before? I was agoraphobic. I didn't leave the
Mhm.
house for 18 months. Didn't talk about that, did I? But it's a massive part of my story before I got into a dark night of the soul. And in 9/11, I reintegrated myself into school and education system. Still won't for me, brainwashing bastards. But it was about me getting back into some kind of social endeavor, which was
Mhm.
really challenging and didn't really properly do it until years later. But it still was good practice. And the fact that I faced my fears, faced the music with regards to that, meant that I didn't snuff myself out, you know. And so we continue. But the point is, when I got to the top of the sky, that's when you have to release and go into your fall. And then eventually, when I got to that third quarter, which was actually when I was 28, when I was having my Saturn returns, when I really found myself and became an astrologer, all of those friends were going. They didn't care about that. And so then I was still letting go of a lot of leads, a lot of belief systems about who I am. In fact, myself right now, I am now at the very bottom, about to have a new moon in July. And that is the end of a 28-year cycle since I was 7 years old when my parents got divorced on my new moon. And it's going to be the beginning of a brand new 28-year cycle, which will carry me forward for that following 28 years. And so, knowing where we are at within our fool's journey with the secondary progression chart gives us everything to know about ourselves and the blueprint of where we are at in our life and our manuscript and how we can plan for that purposefully and accept ourselves with more love where we are at now. That's the power and the potency of what I do. And that's the healing that we get to know where we are at within our own symphony.
Mm-hmm. That is brilliant. And I am so now invested in having you create my chart and to see where I am at, because I said, I know I was born in a new moon. And so I'm like thinking in my head, like 28, what was happening when I was 28? And it wasn't long ago, but just okay. So you talk about where they are, and then I mean, do you what exactly do you need from people? Like, you need to have like their location, their time of birth.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's so much to go into it. That was just one technique, which is my favorite one because it's therapeutic. And it takes a couple of hours to do a secondary progression chart reading. But a normal natal chart reading, what I do is I read what was going on at the flash moment of someone's birth. So what you have is the wheel, and this is beautiful the way this works. If I'll give it a breakdown. So basically, you have the wheel, and on the left-hand side of the wheel, at what you would say is 9 o'clock on the clock face, is the eastern horizon. And that's always moving, always moving. There's always something rising over the eastern horizon. The sun rises there and it sets in the west, which would be 3 o'clock on the clock face.
Yep.
This is the ascendant, where the sun rises in the east. And on the west is the descendant, where the stars go to die. And so I was born at 1 a.m. in the morning, and all the planets were underneath. The sun and the moon were underneath the horizon. I'm quite shy. I mean, I do like conversation, but normally I'm quite an internal person, right? I didn't have any. It was a dark night when I was born. There wasn't any planets on the top of the sky. But some people, they're born with all the planets on the top, and they're like, "Gosh, get me a break." Think about Princess Diana. She's like, "Give me some privacy." Or like Michael Jackson, they've got the stars on the top of the sky, and so these types of things are the dynamics which we learn about. Also, if there's planets so close to the sun, you can't see them because the sun's too bright. So actually, right now, today, we've got the re-emergence of Mercury and Venus, which are always really close to the sun. But it's a really big omen because we're actually working with coming into our value, coming into our potency of communications and connections right now. I haven't seen Venus actually as it's re-emerging as the evening starts. So when we do, personally, each one of us see it in the evening, because 6 months ago it was the morning star,
right?
Which is basically the first star to re-emerge after the sun has set is the evening star. In the morning is the last star before the sun rises to be seen, and this is Venus. And so this means a lot. Venus rules Taurus and Libra. It's about our values, it's about our self-worth, it's about the frequency which we emit to ourselves, it's about how we project into others and how others see us. And so all of these types of things we can see in the chart, and it all means so much, whether it's in the current sky or whether it's actually a flash of our own personal chart. It's actually our greatest days and our most challenging moments also. And so when we know this, we can find actually what's best for us to midwife ourselves through our own challenges, knowing that there will be waves for us to catch like a surfer. All of these different waves are allowing us to have a better rapport and to speak more kindly and lovingly to ourselves, to report back and anchor a message of love continually throughout our days. We need to remind ourselves every single day how we are our nearest and dearest and our farthest support system.
Right.
The moon is our internal, and Saturn is our external. And we're both these authorities. We're both these loving forces. And we are all these planets. We're all of these frequencies. And the more that we build up our connection to our chart, then it goes into these types of languages, which are more metaphysical. And it's I like to teach and mentor people into being their own astrologer. It's not about
Mhm.
coming to me for a reading every now and again. After you've had your own natal chart reading, I encourage people to learn that every new moon and every full moon, they can follow it, knowing where it's falling in different positions of their chart. Oh, I'm shedding a part of my identity. I'm shedding some doubts about my value. I'm shedding this month about some old way of communicating, which used to always hinder me. But now I'm also perfecting it with every new moon and adapting myself and finding my wisdom and finding my greater relationships to others and finding my role in the world. And so we're always growing with every new moon and every full moon, and we can follow that in our chart once we know how. And that's how I got started
Yep.
over 10 years ago, always drawing charts, starting to read them for other people. And since 2017, I've been doing it professionally and with working with my heroes that I studied back in
Yes.
2010, 2009 on YouTube. I told you I was a motley crew of them. And now I've interviewed pretty much all of them on my
Mhm.
YouTube channel, over 140 interviews there. And it was actually in 2020 that when all this stuff started to come out, I decided that I was going to come to Mexico and do what was one of my ambitions and teach astrology workshops, not just online, but which I've been working on my YouTube channel since 2012. I've done every new moon and every full moon on my channel since 2016. But to actually in person teach and empower people to their charts in groups and workshops here in Mexico is what I've been doing for the past few months. And it's a manifestation of me living my dreams because I've grounded my influence in the template that is astrology.
Mhm.
Some people might do it with music. Some people might be carpenters. Some people might call themselves the carpenters and start a band. It doesn't matter what you
Yeah.
do, as long as you know yourself and enjoy doing it.
Mhm.
And I like
Okay.
to empower people to that using astrology.
I love the idea of empowering people to do it for themselves. I am going to turn this to me just again for a second here. I have a twin sister. Okay. This is
Really, that's great. That's perfect for
so
astrology because one of the arguments is, wow, how can two people be so vastly different in astrology? And there's been lots and lots and lots of research about it.
yeah. So my question though is, how different are our charts going to look? We're 27 minutes apart in terms of when we were born, but everything else, it's same day, same month, same year, right? Same location. I how does that factor into, or would we look different in terms of having a chart?
Well, yes, like these things, 17 minutes is a long time in astrology. First, the ascending degree will change every 4 minutes or so.
Okay.
And so, because there's two signs, I mean, there's 24 hours and there's 12 signs. So the ascendant sign changes every 2 hours. And the moon also will shift degrees once every, just over every hour and a half, something like this. And so this is very potent and important. But not only that, there's a massive part of research with regards to astrology and twins that they can play out different parts of each other's consciousness very often. And this is something very interesting. And even if they're separated at birth, the study has taken place. They've practiced to look at the different ways that they play out each other's shadows and different sides. Also, Gemini is the sign of the twins. And so even if you're not a Gemini, you might have a Gemini moon, you might have a potency with regards to that planets in that sign and communication. Mercury is the ruling planet of Gemini. It went into Gemini today as well, actually, yesterday. But it's like it's going to be in Gemini.
I do have a Gemini moon, and I'm technically like a Cancer-Gemini. I'm on the cusp. My birthday's June 24th, so.
Yeah, Cancer. Then we don't do cusp as far as I'm quite
Okay, all right.
about it.
I
But
love that.
My friend is the same. She's born around that time on the summer solstice. Actually, a few hours earlier, she'd have been a Gemini, but she's Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but Cancer's great because it's actually one of the most underrated signs because
I agree.
We're both Cancers. Brandon and I are both Cancers.
I'm July 2nd though. I'm July 2nd, so I'm a little further in. Yeah.
Well, it's fun. It's good. I said the good things, man.
Yeah.
But it is because emotional intelligence is something that one can't buy. It's only through experience that one can bring that energy. And it's, as we said, that midwife terminology to be able to provide that space. It's only due to one having had to force themselves to nurture themselves, that they can provide that for others, and all these types of things. It's beautiful. And water cuts through things because it's not about light, it's more magnetic, it's beyond illusion. Also, I'm a Capricorn, I'm opposite. So, like,
Yes.
my birthday's opposite your one as well, almost exactly.
And I was born around noon, so that we're total opposites. That's hilarious.
Nice, nice. So you've got the sun at the top of your sky.
Yeah, like 12:13, I think I was born PM.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you're probably an Aries ascendant.
Let's see. This is something new I'm getting into. I have Virgo moon. I'd have to look up my ascendant.
Virgo moon's very good for podcasting because
Yeah.
Virgo's all about doing something that you're dedicated to, and a media, and speaking and creating a message, leading with that message and being seen from it, rather than having to prove it, just being the representation of it.
Oh, that's great because I love to podcast. I've been doing it since about 2014. First in the comedy realm, and now more like still comedy, but you see what we're doing here. And then I have my own thing I do at morelawsmoreproblems.com. It's my thing behind me. And I was kind of on that same path as far as discovering truth that you were on. And something that I discovered, and this will kind of bring it back to what we were talking about, is that a lot of people just get in this victim consciousness. And I feel that that's really the root of the problem. It's not even the government so much, because it's like the government's just filling a vacuum that these people are creating. Like I used to hate the government so much, but now I'm like, you know what? It's these people are choosing it. They're like running toward it. You know what I mean? Like, please enslave us. So it's at some point, I'm like, I can't even hate the government anymore. It's like, I want to start enslaving these people. Like I'm walking around the store and I'm like, I'm going to be your emperor if you guys don't stop. You don't understand? Like, take off the mask or I'll be the emperor. Like,
You don't know how I like some of these things are quite prominent omens. I feel that actually us uprising into very conscious empowerment.
yeah.
All good things rot from the core. So eventually we will be put into making such great changes in the world that we will be put into powerful positions. And it's our job not to go into egocentrism, not to let power rot us like we're seeing with the other people who are in control of the world today. That's our biggest challenge.
Yeah.
And we'll see also that maybe the people who were born in the tiers below us by a few decades also can be our challenge to keep them under good reins as well.
Mm-hmm.
As well as us being opening the door for the old people but younger than us, and them opening the door for us. There is also like people being born today are going to be challenged. People being born growing up today are going to be challenges.
Yes.
A lot of them are going to be very conscious, but there's also going to be a lot of very tyrannical forces. But yes, what you say about getting into depression, this is something which we think I see with people, and you're like, okay, why can't these people wake up with their mercy? Why can't they stop selling themselves short? Like one person I went to school with, whose dear friend came to my dad's funeral with me. I went to she was the prom queen. I went to the prom with her, and so she's a good friend. And she still sent recently something to my mum in the post. But she went and got her vaccine the other day. No offense to anybody who has, but like at the end of the day, I see that as something as not very good option, not very good choice. It's not being made for sale. I'd rather lick dog shit off the floor. Like, but like the point is, like I don't. It's not my place to go and tell her these things. She already knew my standpoint on these things to a certain degree, and it's already frayed at the relationship to the degree that one can't even say anymore. And it's not so it's quite a divisive time like we've never experienced. But the funny thing is, I had this conversation with somebody yesterday. When we look back on things like the moon landing, there would have been conscious people like us, privy and witness to that, who knew that that was a stinking pile of cow done as well. But the thing is, when we talk about cow dung and shit and lies and deception, all of these things that are done in societies on a level which we can't even touch on because we're not even privy to it to certain degrees. They are, in the sense, if you look at nursery rhymes, like they talk about like the rotten sweet apple from the core, it kind of does fertilize us to become more conscious, to adapt in a way, which is kind of peculiar. It's not something which I've advocated for,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something which I'm noticing within the depiction of our story as humanity. And it's something we think, okay, well, it's not to say that we want to put rotten things into our children. It's not something we want to perpetuate and continue, is it? But it's something which we're noticing is something which they mature. Like even with regards to like making cheese, it's fermentation, isn't it? And if you've got an apple tree or something, sometimes they put like a copper iron into the root of it to make the fruit ferment more. And so this is what I see, which is going on with regards to people who have moved beyond their money grabbing, their oligarchs, the society template of of things that are like blue bloods, or if you go like into like the Templars, the reason that their power control is due to their wanting to influence and mold. But really, us as rebels, as conscious stars, is
Mm-hmm.
our art and our creativity and our joy, which is of a frequency that even that power has disconnected to. So our sovereignty in keeping ourselves from going down that route would be to continue to go into the garden, continue to go into our music, continue to go into our art and our instruments and our writing and our poetry and our wordplay, to create new forms of language and expression,
Mm-hmm.
and to break down boundaries, to say, hey, I'm talking to you in public, motherfucker. You got beautiful eyes. What you got to say about it?
I was just talking about that earlier on a podcast we recorded because we were talking about the Nine of Wands and how that guy's beat up. And we were saying, well, what are you going to say if it comes in a love reading? I'm like, well, this could be going out in the world and trying to talk to people in the physical realm and getting beat up by some of them, but it's okay. You got to just keep doing it if you're single, you know? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very synchronistic. That's hilarious.
All right, what I'm going to say though is I feel like we need to conclude here because we've taken up now an hour and a half of your time. So if people want to find you, where can they do so?
They're very welcome to come and subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Unifying Perspectives on YouTube. I do a video every single day on there, whether it's a message, chatting, or walking around, or whether it's an academic video forecast of astrology,
Mm-hmm.
or interview, or these types of things. So check that out. And also on Instagram, it's at Philip Daniel Miles. If you want personal astrology consultation, which is really an investment in yourself, then I'm here to service you. And that's best to get hold of me via an email, unityaroundthecorner@hotmail.com. And I'd be very excited to read your chart to you. It's actually $200 for hour's natal chart reading, or for 2 hours, it's $365. And so I'd be very excited to be able to hold that space. All of the consultations are done on Zoom, where I actually share the chart on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I always get great feedback from people who rewatch their videos like 6 months down the line, and they're still learning and they're still seeing the value in what's still unfolding and what has already transgressed. So it is a very valuable investment, and I'm excited to be able to hold that space and impart the wisdom that's reflected in people's charts to them.
I love that so much. We'll put all of that in the kind of caption for our episode, and then definitely all of our listeners, look, we're going to tag him. I've been taking some pictures of us on the side while we're chatting, so we'll post all of those. I'm so intrigued, and you know that my star sign was the first tattoo I ever got. I always felt such a connection to Cancer, and I love learning more about this. But thank you so much for your time.
You mentioned that you got Gemini moon in the 12th house. So it's going to be in Gemini, which is the sign before Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is really intuitive. You are, especially maybe telepathic with your sister.
Yes.
Unspoken words, you just feel into the message. That's very cool. Just to finish up with regards to that vision, which came to me in a flash for a moment there. But yes, thank you so much for holding the space and inviting me to be interviewed by you guys. It was a lot of fun talking and exploring. Didn't expect to go off on many of those avenues. So thank you.
That always happens.
That's great. Yeah, exactly. Exactly what happens. Yeah, I want to say thank you very much, Philip. I'm really glad you came on and talked to us. I got a lot out of this. I'm gonna have to watch it probably a couple times to go through everything, because it's funny how that's how my brain works. I'll just get off on a tangent. I'm like, nope, got to come back here. Got to come back here. So yeah, but it was great, and there's definitely a lot of information. So thanks, and I look forward to speaking to you again. hopefully sometime soon we could do this, because I think this is the thing, that the chemistry between you two is just really great on the screen. That's why I talk a lot more normally. Ashley will tell you, but I was like, this, and I told Ashley before this started, I go, I feel like this is going to be a podcast for me to watch, and then I can interact when I want to. And it's exactly what it was. So thank you for providing that for me.
Well, so I just wanted to say also, forgot to mention that, and I'm grateful for your reflection. Thank you for that. And it's funny because we got the bouncing off of each other because we got our suns opposite, so it does often work well with these types of things. So yeah, we're just going into the next new moon. Will be the beginning of the eclipse season. This new moon in Taurus, and it's just after Venus, which rules Taurus, is re-emerging, and we're going to come to an eclipse in Sagittarius, the lunar eclipse. And these eclipses always happen in couplets. I often liken it to an airlock. You've got to go in one door and close it behind you after going in, and then you can go into the next door and then close that door, and then you're through to another section of life, another reel of the movie, another part of our reality. And so this is very powerful because the South Node eclipse in Sagittarius, the lunar eclipse, is cutting off our emotional belief systems, our connection and faith that we are put into things that maybe don't serve us anymore, like these education systems, like these governments. So we're going to be seeing that there's going to be more and more activity with regards to finding alternatives throughout the summer, because the writing's been on the wall for quite some time, and there's only so much more before the next phase of this story can unfold.
Right.
And then after that, there will be another new moon in Gemini, and that will be a solar eclipse. And so this is more a rebooting of the inspiration, of the messages that's shared. It's more hunger for connecting different ways of sharing information within between ourselves, and even directly to our source, rather than have to go round and get Chinese whispers, or excuse me, telephone numbers, whatever it is, iron.
I love it. That's great.
You know what I'm saying? It's basically coming into our connection with ourselves and one another, rather than having to go to false authorities, coming into our own sovereignty more and more through these eclipses.
Well, I'm super stoked to watch your videos, and the fact that you post them every day, I'm like, now there's an endless amount of content to fill my time, and kind of provide some insight for me. Again, thank you so much for coming on. And as always, you can listen to us on Tuesdays. That's our regular Brandon and myself podcast. And then we have our guest series starting. Well, it actually already started, and it's on every Thursday. So give us a listen, and definitely, reach out to Philip. He's obviously brilliant. So
yeah, exactly.
You,
he is.
Guy.
And thank you guys for listening. You can find everything at tarotbull.com, tarotbull.com. Also, don't forget to check out my new book, and that's at shadowworked.com. And give us a holler if you guys remember. Like we said, if you leave a review anywhere, we will read it live on the air. We just had a really beautiful review a couple weeks ago, so send us some more. Well, I say a couple weeks ago, it was a few days ago, but in the listener land, it'll be
yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to touch on something because the book is a massive synchronicity to me.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The metaphysics of going into different types of media is really a timeless affair. A bit like when you get your driving license, it's a bit like getting your wings, or when you actually do become a pilot, if everybody ever does that, that takes you into a higher spiritual realm metaphysically. When you get that stamp, or like when you book your first passport. I didn't get a first passport till I was like, 17, I don't know. Regardless, when you get these things, these stamps, you get these different things. So when you record a record, in a studio, the same thing, it gets minted. And likewise, when you write a book, you become an author, and it puts you into a different demographic of self-orientation. Not just because of the feel substantiated because I've written a book. That's great in the confidence realm, but actually metaphysically, you made a magical amulet which is timeless. And so that's something that you leave your mark in reality. You've etched your groove, and it will be gone. I mean, you'll be gone, but that book's still be there.
Yeah.
So that's quite a magical thing to have done. Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And it kind of reminds me like a video game when you go on to the next level. You can go and but we could talk about this for hours. But thank you again, Philip. I really appreciate you giving me that. Congratulations. It means a lot. And until next week, everybody, or next time, stay terrible. That was terrible.